Your supervisor has no responsibility whatsoever to give you a job. Your supervisor has no responsibility whatsoever to provide you with work. If you are not making a contribution to that supervisor's business.
Originating from deep inside the Rocky Mountains, transported through the power of the internet, and arriving inside your tiny earbuds. It's the Appraiser Coach Podcast, helping appraisers increase their efficiency, quality, and make more money. Here's the guy who makes it his life's mission to create value for real estate appraisers nationwide. Your host and the Appraiser Coach, Dustin Harris.
Welcome, everybody, to the Appraiser Coach Podcast. We're back with another Dear USPAP instructor questions coming from our good friend, Mr. Tim Anderson. But first, I want to pause and remind you that we're sponsored by two great companies, one of them being OREP Insurance. OREP is my E&O of choice, should be yours as well, because they are a broker. I want to talk about what that means in just a few minutes, but for now, find them on the web, orep.org. That's OREP.org. And of course, Alamode is the software that I've been using for many, many years to write my appraisal reports. You should be as well. Check them out by going to their website, alamode.com, or call them. Pick up the phone, friends. Call them. Talk to a real person at 800-ALAMODE. Welcome back to the program, Mr. Tim Anderson. Tim, can you believe we're almost to our 1,000th episode of the podcast, and you have been on from the very beginning?
Dustin, thank you. I appreciate the fact that you and your listeners are willing to stay in contact with me. And I love your blue shirt, Dustin. I think that's great.
Thank you. You have a nice blue shirt as well, my friend. I'm sporting a little bit of a I wouldn't call it a beard, but have not shaved in a couple of days. So if you're on YouTube, you get to see a rare version of both guests on the podcast, both people on the podcast sporting a little bit of facial hair. Tim, you are a USPAP expert. You wouldn't probably use that word, but I'm going to. You also are referred to frequently as the appraiser's advocate. Talk to us about that and some of the services that you provide before we dive into a couple questions today.
Well, Dustin, thank you. I appreciate that. I do know a little bit about USPAP, but there are others to whom I would add the appellation of expert. But thank you anyway. I appreciate that. And in line with that, my business is now not appraising, but in consulting with appraisers who find themselves on the wrong end of that letter from the State Appraisal Board, or the wrong end of that letter from Fannie Mae, or the wrong end of that subpoena from a plaintiff. And what I do is work with the appraiser to get them past that roadblock, get them over that hurdle. And typically, this is something we are into and out of relatively quickly. Are these processes painless? No. But part of what we do is to make sure that they don't happen again, which is what I consider the important part of what I do now. But if anybody needs some help, you got trouble with an adjustment. I mean, I consult with appraisers regularly if there's something I thoroughly enjoy doing. Or maybe go over some reports so you don't have to worry about that letter from the State Appraisal Board. So yes, please get in contact with me, Tim at theappraisersadvocate.com.
Thank you, Tim. I've used both of those, both before and after services from you, meaning proactively bulletproofing my report, if you will, and then on the flip side, getting one of those nasty letters and picking up the phone and saying, "Tim, help me," and he always does. So always a pleasure to have you on the program, and pleasure calling you friend. All right. Speaking of friends, my friends, listeners out there, we on a regular basis do what we call the Dear USPAP Instructor episodes, where you have an opportunity as a listener to reach out with questions. Now, usually we are going to answer those questions pretty quickly, like within 24 hours. If you'll send them either to Tim at theappraisersadvocate.com or the coach at theappraisercoach.com. But we often ask permission to share those on the air. We will use first names only today. We've got a couple of questions that have come in. Let's hit the first one, Tim. The first one comes from Patrick, and it reads, hypothetical question, he said, This is in regard to record retention. An appraiser has decided to retire and not renew his license. Once their license expires and they are a quote unquote civilian, is there a legal imperative to continue keeping the files for 5 years?
Okay, Dustin, thank you. Patrick, yes, there is. Now, granted, you've given up your license, you're not practicing anymore. If you had a designation, you gave that up too. That's fine. And happiness, much happiness in your retirement.
Let me
USPAP
pause you for just
says,
a second,
you got
Tim, if you don't mind.
jump
Just
in,
because
jump in there, Dustin.
sorry, you said something that I wasn't aware of. So, and maybe I misunderstood what you're saying, but let's say someone is an SRA. They
Mhm.
give up their license. Are they also giving up their designation as an SRA?
Yes, if
Wow.
they,
Okay.
because um, the to receive a designation through the ASA or the IAAO or the Appraisal Institute to appraise, you have to be qualified as an appraiser. Now,
Mhm.
you can shift your license into retired status. And I'm an MAI, and my license is retired.
Got it. Okay.
And under that basis, I could keep it.
Hmm.
No, excuse me, let me back up. I have my designation. It's in retired status.
Got it.
Now, I could give up my state license and still keep my MAI, but in retired status. However, I couldn't appraise because I'm not an appraiser.
Yeah. Got it.
Now,
Okay. Interesting.
I have not gone that route yet, even though I am retired. But yeah, if you're going to give up your license, if you're going to retire, then you've either got to give up your designation or choose retired status. I should have been more clear than that, Dustin.
No, that's
And
great.
thank you
No,
for
I'm
asking the
glad you
question.
clarified, and it was something I learned something new today. By the way, I want to add something. I stopped before I got clear to the end of the question with Patrick. He first asked about retaining your files, but what he also said was, and that I didn't read, is does USPAP continue to apply to this person? So take it away.
Okay. All right. Yes. USPAP continues to apply. It continues to apply in that the appraiser has to keep the records for 5 years. Now you say, well, I'm not an appraiser anymore.
Right.
That's true. You're not. When you developed the records, when you formed the value opinion, et cetera, you were. Therefore, that requirement, that part of USPAP stays in place. If you will look in your state appraisal statute relative to file retention, it will say you will keep your files for how many ever years the state statute requires. And it does not grant you a statutory exemption merely because you choose to give up your license, whether you give your license up voluntarily or otherwise. You still have to maintain the files.
Mm.
You are still responsible for the decisions you made. You can still be sued. I think I told you some time ago, when my father was 84 years old, he was subpoenaed to testify over something he had done when he was younger than you are.
Oh my gosh.
So,
Wow.
and my dad was an attorney, so he knew how to play the game.
Sure.
And he showed up. We went to the deposition. He showed up, and they'd ask him a question. I don't know. I'm
Yeah.
84
Right.
years
That was
old. I
that
don't
was
remember.
40 years ago. Right.
And
Yeah.
they smiled, and we went on, and we got an hour's worth of deposition. The attorneys had to do that. They would have been derelict in their ethical and legal responsibilities not to.
Mm.
But what they found out was here's an 84-year-old man who didn't have a clue what he did 40 some odd years ago,
Right.
which they knew anyway. But they had to do it. He had to go. There was a subpoena. Could we have gotten him out of it? Yeah, he had all sorts of health problems, and we could have gotten a judge to say no, don't worry about it. But as I say, my dad was an attorney, and he knew how to play the game and why you played the game that way. So he went along with it. But yeah, USAP still applies. And remember, just because 5 years and one day have passed does not mean you are somehow now exempt from professional and ethical responsibilities.
Right.
You can still be sued. You can still be subpoenaed, and you still have to show up and do the dance that is
Right.
required by the law.
Yeah.
So yeah, and then again, you must make provisions for maintaining your files, keeping them secure, protecting them, etc. So yes, that responsibility does not end merely because you send your license back to the state.
This next question was not asked by Patrick. This is my question, but and I think you and I have either talked on air or off air about this before. But there is a thought process out there among appraisers that the faster you can get rid of those 5 years of records, the better off you're going to be. Meaning, if somebody comes against you 6 years after, that you can just claim in, well, sorry, I don't have my work file anymore. What's the cautionary tale that you would give to somebody who takes that approach that, hey, I don't have a work file, therefore I have nothing to say to you?
Okay. I think you've spoken with Isaac Peck.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I think if I recall that particular podcast with Isaac, Isaac didn't take a stance because there is no answer to the question. Okay, 5 years. All right, so what? If your state does not have a statute of repose, in other words, a statute of limitations, and you can be held professionally or ethically responsible for however long, then you can be held responsible for however long. If your state has a statute of repose, then it says 2 years after you turn the appraisal in. Okay, then 2 years you cannot be held responsible anymore. But USPAP still says you'll keep it for 5 years
Hmm.
because the statute of repose refers to civil stuff. It doesn't refer to criminal stuff. And let's face it, well, rarely are appraisers prosecuted criminally. Yeah, they can be. And your work file is going to help you. Our mutual friend Peter Christensen has said on numerous occasions in numerous venues, keep your files until the day pass forever. And he tells the story of an appraiser who was sued, and the homeowner, very incorrectly and very ignorantly, complained that the appraiser never showed up at the house. And of course, that could be very serious because the appraiser signs a certification saying, yeah, I did.
Yeah.
And Fannie Mae tends to get bent out of shape. All the GSEs get bent out of shape when the appraiser doesn't go to the house, but yet signs a certification saying, yes, they did. And the appraiser was able to go back to the work file, even though it was over 5 years old, and pull up a picture that was not in the report. And the reason the picture was not in the report is because the appraiser took a picture of the bathroom and caught himself in the mirror.
Yep.
So the appraiser was able to show that, yes, he was in the house. And of course, the complaint got thrown out.
You know what's funny about that, Tim? I take a selfie every single time I do an inspection for that very reason. Not because I'm vain, but I take the bathroom mirror every single time and put it in the work file, just on case. So
Yep, just on account of cause. Yep.
Yep. Thank you, Tim. We're going to pause and talk a little bit about our sponsors. Then we are going to come back with another great question from one of our listeners. And Tim, our first sponsor today is OREP Insurance. And I know you have done some great things with OREP Insurance. In fact, as you were talking, I pulled up orep.org and went to the benefits tab just to kind of see what's out there for appraisers. It's not just about E&O, folks. It's about the many, many benefits that come with OREP that's different than any other company out there, including continuing education, free continuing education for members, and a couple of CE classes that came up, how to raise appraisal quality and minimize risk, and appraisal liability and risk manage it by none the less but Tim Anderson. Way to go, Tim. I've taken at least one of those classes, and you do an excellent job. Folks, if you're with any other E&O company out there, check out OREP. OREP.org. That's OREP.org. Alamode, of course, is the software of choice for me and many appraisers across the nation, across the world. It is the leader in software for residential real estate appraisal writing. Why? Because of the tools that are built in, the mobile technology, the ability to separate your addendum and write on one screen while you're doing your adjustments on another, the smart adjuster, the comp view, side by side, you can look at all of your comps at one time, the built-in features with the math that can be done with your cost approach, and so many tried and true things that will allow you to be able to have high quality reports for less time. Folks, you're going to pay a little bit more for Alamode. But if you're looking at it as an investment, you're paying far less because of the ROI. Check them out by picking up the phone to call them at 800 a la mode, or you can visit them on their website at alamode.com. All right, folks, welcome back to the program. We do have our good friend and resident USPAP expert, Mr. Timothy Anderson, on the line. Welcome back, Tim.
Thank you, Dustin. I appreciate it. It's really good to be here.
Always a pleasure to have you, my friend. Let's take on I think will be a pretty quick question and answer. This comes from Maria, and it's directed right at you, my friend. It says, Tim, I know this is not a USPAP question, but I want you to address fee splits. I'm an appraiser trainee, and I'm wondering if my supervisor has a responsibility to pay me a customary and reasonable salary for my work. What do you think, Tim?
Okay, no, Maria, your mentor or supervisor does not. That is between you, your mentor supervisor, and the IRS. Now, here's the issue. You can say, okay, I want 25% of the fee. Okay. And the mentor says, or supervisor says, sure, we'll pay you 25% of the fee. So you're getting 25% of the fee. But see, that's not the question. The question is, are you giving your mentor, and say the fee is $500. Okay. So you're getting $125. Are you giving your mentor $125 worth of work? Or is it costing the mentor $300 of his or her time to walk you through the appraisal time and time and time again and correct the same mistakes and point out the same roadsides time and time and time again? If you get that appraisal, you get through it with a minimum of hassle, plop it on the supervisor's desk. The supervisor looks at it, makes a couple of spelling changes, maybe puts in a comma, maybe adds one more paragraph of explanation, that goes out the door. Then, yeah, you're providing $125 worth of service, and you probably need a raise, quite frankly. Whereas if that's not true, then no, you're not providing $125 worth of service. You're providing a negative value of service. And your supervisor has no responsibility whatsoever to give you a job. Your supervisor has no responsibility whatsoever to provide you with work. If you are not making a contribution to that supervisor's business, to that supervisor's bottom line. And I don't mean to be cold, and I don't need to be heartless, because, at the end of the day, we're all human, and we have to look after each other. But in the same vein, maybe the best way to look after yourself is to say, you know what? That supervisor and I just aren't cut out of the same cloth. I need to move on. And then move on. Because, again, nobody owes you anything. I made this GLA adjustment at $75 a square foot. Fine, that's the mechanical end of it. The intellectual end of it, the philosophical end of it, the constructive end of it is why. And in doing so, did I explain a portion of the current market to my client?
Right.
And without being able to answer those two questions, no, you're not providing any value. Somebody could do that for $15 an hour. So,
right.
Yes, is there a learning curve? Yeah, there's a learning curve. Nobody debates that. But it's not that long. So therefore, it's not a question of, am I being paid enough? It's a question of, am I providing enough value to merit the pay I'm getting?
Bingo. Yeah, I love it. Yeah. And this is not directed toward Maria in any way. I don't know Maria personally.
We don't know. We don't know.
But I think sometimes we appraisers, especially appraiser trainees, we get a little bit of an entitlement mentality and think, well, I'm jumping into a profession, therefore I should be paid as a professional. And I encourage my coaching clients, who are mostly hiring trainees, they're not the opposite side. I have coached a few trainees, but mostly we're talking about the business owners, is give the value back congruent to what you receive. And typically, honestly, through the training process, that means hourly. It's a rare dog that I see a commission split when it comes to trainees, because they're learning, they're growing, they're getting education from you, and that's part of their quote unquote paycheck. And so, treat that as such. And when they start to give you back in value, make sure that the value you give them is commensurate to with what they're getting, which I think is what you're saying, Tim. Thank you. Thank you, Tim. I really appreciate you being on. As always, the USPAP expert and, of course, the Appraiser's advocate. One more time, Mr. Tim Anderson, how do people get a hold of you if they want to utilize your vast knowledge and services?
Dustin, thank you. Tim at theappraisersadvocate.com.
You've been listening to the Appraiser Coach podcast with Dustin Harris. If you like what you hear, please give us a 5-star rating and post a short review on iTunes. For more in-depth insider information on how you can make more money as a real estate appraiser, visit theappraisercoach.com and sign up for the All-Star team today. Thanks for joining us. And now, get out there and create some value.